Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Do I Have Time for This? The series that looks at old and new video games from indie to AAA and everything in between to help you figure out if you've got the time to play, finish, 100% complete a game, or just leave it in your backlog to forever gather dust. Today we are looking at a game that made one of the most mixed entrances in the AAA space in the last year, Dragon's Dogma 2. After playing 48 hours of this sprawling open world, I can definitely see where this mixed bag opinion comes from, with some soaring highs gameplay-wise that never gets matched by the world and quest design. Set in the lands of Vermund and Batal, the player is the Arisen, a warrior of great renown, nominated by the great dragon of the realm to slay them in battle. What starts off as a straightforward slay the dragon story quickly spirals into a Game of Thrones style plot, with court intrigue, false monarchs, and mysterious characters left and right. So before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's see what a video game becomes when it follows the mantra of gameplay is king. Following an extremely in-depth character creator, we are introduced to our Arisen character as a member of a prison camp, digging through rubble for artifacts. Here we get a brief tutorial before being thrown headlong into combat against a massive Gorgon, which was ticking all my boxes straight off the bat. From here we get to have a ride on a griffin into the starting area of the game, Vermund. This is where you'll be introduced to all of the classic RPG mechanics that many complained about at launch. Just to remind you, this review is looking at Dragon's Dogma 2 at the end of 2024, meaning there's been almost a year's worth of gameplay improvements and updates to make the experience smoother, and I can only talk to what I've experienced in the game at the time of recording. Let's start with the most obscure sounding but easiest to manage aspect of the game, the pawn system.
For $1,500.
Whew, I won't do 1,500. And what's the best you can do?
The best I can do is 2,000, period.
I'm talking about this prior to speaking of the combat or exploration because pawns are key to all aspects of the game. Pawns are essentially humanoid characters in the world of Dragon's Dogma that look and sound exactly like normal people, but if you looked at them through the lens of a corporation. I'm not joking, these pawns are bound to the will of the Arisen, and as such they'll do anything you say. The pawns can either be found wandering the world or through rift stones, where you can look at a range of pawns in the nearby area to call upon to join your party. Your main pawn is the one you create yourself from top to bottom, including their class, which levels up alongside you and is loaned out to other players behind the scenes. This not only allows your pawn to gain items in other players' worlds without you doing anything, but it also lets them gain knowledge. If your pawn completes a quest or visits an area you haven't been to before, they will shout over that they know of a treasure chest or secret nearby and lead you to it. They can also pick up tips such as enemy weaknesses and strategies. This knowledge isn't limited to your main pawn either. If you hire a fresh pawn, they may have knowledge on how to complete your current quest, or may know of treasures in the area as you walk through it. You can also provide this knowledge back to them, and they will remark on the strategies and secrets they've gained from you. The system at play here, where knowledge is shared across multiple players, makes me think of it as the basis of something like Death Stranding, whereby players accomplishing the same goals provides everyone with a smoother and more enjoyable experience. Pawns, much like your player character, can fit into one of many classes, and fit into the standard RPG tropes of tanks, healers, and damage dealers. I found as a rule you'd need some range members in your party, as there was an obscene amount of flying enemies, but you may find a better way of dealing with them. The pawns also have specializations, letting them heal you with items from your bag, finding rare crafting materials and marking them on your map, or even as portable merchants. It's worth noting that only you and your main pawn level up, meaning you're constantly encouraged to swap out your current pawns for new and higher leveled ones, otherwise they'll end up hugely outpaced. With the mixture of skills on display, alongside you being encouraged to change your own class during the game, meaning you need to change your party makeup, the game really encourages you to not get attached to these pawn characters. Now that we've dealt with the pawns, let's move on to the meat of this game, which is clearly where Capcom spent the majority of the time, the combat. I have to say, if it weren't for the combat, I don't think I'd have managed to play this game for as long as I had. There's a few different parts on display here. Firstly, the weapons definitely feel crunchy when you're hitting with melee or even a bow. You can see blood fly, and oftentimes physically see the impact of the attack you do in terms of how the enemy reacts to it. On top of this, there's a complex physics system meshed into the combat. During the fight, you can pick up items or even small enemies and just throw them, be it off a cliff, into another enemy, or even to a pawn who will stab it. Not only this, for the bigger enemies, you can jump on top of them and climb them. There's nothing more fun than climbing onto the back of a Cyclops, reaching its head and stabbing it in the eye, causing it to stumble and swing wildly. You can also knock the larger creatures off balance, then you and a pawn can just push the creature over, opening it up for a critical attack. Magic is extremely overpowered in the world of Dragon's Dogma 2, as it should be, but the spells can take a significant amount of time to cast to balance things out. If you have two mages in your party with the same spell, however, they can combine powers to cast it even faster, which is a massive boon. Jumping on huge creatures and taking them on is extremely satisfying, and if you couple the complex physics with the open world nature of the game, you can come across some crazy personalized moments which stand out for your journey. These can range from turning a Cyclops into a bridge you can walk across, getting dragged off to a lair by a troll, or even flying halfway across the map while stabbing a griffin in the face. These creatures can even grab members of your party, for you to then need to attack its hand to free them. Truly an in-depth and frankly exceptional set of combat systems. So, with a combat system firmly praised, how does it hold up on the RPG and open world front? Well, this is where things start to fall apart for me. There was a resurgence last year of games like the old Xbox 360 era, and while some of them benefited from the simplicity, Dragon's Dogma 2 definitely doesn't. NPCs, for the most part, don't really speak to you.
Sorry, my face is tired from dealing with everything.
There aren't any form of dialogue options or skill checks, and for the most part, towns and villages are essentially just set dressing. You can go into almost any building, and there will be a mundane item or chest to get, but that's it. Comparing it to something as light touch as a Skyrim or a Witcher 3, there just isn't enough here to make it believable as an actual world, and oftentimes you'll expect something to happen or want some kind of interaction, but you just don't get anything. Quests are also extremely simplistic, often obscure affairs. Usually they consist of go and speak to someone or fetch a number of items, kill a few goblins, and so on. A good example from the main quest was infiltrating a masquerade ball, which sounds full of options, only for you to get a costume, walk into a single room, then walk out of the back door for a cutscene.
Oh, maybe we should go inside.
But Marge, that little guy hasn't done anything yet. Look at him. He's gonna do something, and you know it's gonna be good.
Another would also be from the main quest, where a fort rises out of the sea. You go in and there's no enemies, you talk to a ghost, get an item, and then just leave. It's so frustrating how surface level these quests are, sometimes hinting at other options you could have made, but never making it obvious how you do something differently. I've had to look up a few quests, because in some instances it never occurred to me that when the quest said, submit the evidence to the gods, I actually had to tackle a nun to the ground instead. You'd think time would have been spent making the main quest more of an experience, but instead we're treated to disappointing writing throughout the entire game. Luckily, it has the fantastic combat to back it up. Moving on from the gameplay for a second, you can tell Capcom spent the other half of their time, aside from the combat, working on the visuals. Using the Reach for the Sky engine from the newer Resident Evil games, Dragon's Dogma 2 simply looks incredible. The main thing I want to point out is that the armor sets in this game actually look cool. It might be such a small thing to most, but the amount of fantasy RPGs I've played where the armor is just standard suits of armor with little to no character is staggering. Here all the armor looks unique, and whilst you bump into many characters with the same armor and weapons on the road, at least the designs themselves aren't just run-of-the-mill plate armor. Aside from this, a lot of time was spent crafting the monsters as well. These screen-filling beasts have slime dripping from their mouths, their scales and hair all look realistically rendered. Whilst this game was taxing on my PC, you can tell a lot of time had been put into the visuals of the game. There's also a massive amount of detail in the particle effects. Not only is there a lot of blood from both you and the creatures, there's ice, fire, lightning spells alongside jars of oil and poison that can be used to your advantage. All of them look incredible, despite the fact that when you have 3 or 4 effects on screen at once, it can get a bit hard to see. So, let's get down to it. How long does this game take? Well, in my playthrough, I completed the majority of side quests alongside the main story and did a lot of exploration, and I came out at an impressive 48 hours. If you just wanted to do the main story and nothing else save for some fights on the road, you're looking at around 30 hours. Full completion, if you can't get enough of the world and want to take off everything, is a whopping 90 hours of playtime. This is mostly due to the way this game operates in terms of travel, and the fact that there are multiple endings, including a true ending. And with the stats out of the way, let's get to the meat of the matter and what puts a lot of people off from playing Dragon's Dogma 2, the fact that it doesn't really respect the player's time. Now, bear with me, there's a lot of gameplay features to run through here, so if I miss one, be sure to let me know in the comments. Let's start with the fast travel system in this absolutely huge open world. Fast travel in Dragon's Dogma 2 requires finite items called fairy stones to carry out. When using these stones, you can only fast travel to a handful of locations that have port crystals at them, which really are limited to just major cities. This means certain villages and towns simply just don't have one, and you have to go there manually. As time goes on, you'll find ways to mitigate this, such as jumping on the back of an ox cart, which often gets raided, cutting your trip short, or via your own portable port crystals, which are extremely rare. This makes travelling anywhere either A, massively expensive, or B, a chore consuming a good 10 to 20 minutes of time to go from one side of the map to the other. On the first trip, this is exciting, coming across new locations, enemies, and NPCs, but on the 10th trip, seeing another 4 goblins you can one-shot, slowing you down from getting from A to B, it just makes you roll your eyes. Next is the way the health bar works. Similar to something like 9 Souls, you don't just take health damage in Dragon's Dogma 2, you also take wounding damage. This is where if you get hit after you have outstanding damage that hasn't been healed, you'll be wounded, meaning either your or your pawn's health bar will be permanently reduced until you can rest. Resting can only be done either at inns for a cost, purchased houses, again at a cost, or using a consumable camping kit when out in the wild, but only at set locations. This then turns into a nightmare at night, where you've travelled all day, have 10% of your original health bar, and are stuck in the pitch black trying to find a campfire to rest at, only to have said rest interrupted by a pack of wolves before you're done. One could call it the classic gracious rhino skill issue and a lack of proper planning, but sometimes the frequency of enemies coupled with the infrequency of the campsites just makes it impossible to do anything but teleport to the nearest town instead. Something else worth bearing in mind is that almost everything on this game is set on a timer. Items, NPCs, quests, even your own pawns can be set on some sort of timer. Certain quests will progress without you, causing key characters to die, food will rot, and pawns can even get sick. All in all, no, this game doesn't really respect your time at all. While saves can be made from the pause menu whenever you're out of combat, combat can go on for quite a bit of time given the huge monsters you're facing. This coupled with the frequency you bump into enemies on the open road and the fact the pawns pretty much won't ignore the fight, it does take forever to get anywhere. Dragon's Dogma 2 is definitely suited to people who have time for longer play sessions, as not very much can get done in half an hour. Overall, I don't recommend Dragon's Dogma 2. Don't get me wrong, I loved the game. And if you're a very specific type of person, or a person who has a lot of time where they don't mind spending 20 minutes going from one town to another, there is probably something here for you. However, despite the combat being incredible, I feel the current iteration of the Monster Hunter series probably does it better and lets you drop into a hunt then leave, with a lot less time wasting in between. Almost everything gameplay wise has a caveat. The pawn system is very cool with its learning systems and variety, but they never stop yammering the whole time that you're with them.
Just yonder looks to be a good spot for harvesting ingredients. This is generally used as a material.
Different combinations of materials result in different creations.
Strike fast and true, and our quarry shall fall. 'Tis easily done. No purchases to be made today, I see. I just hope the shopkeep understands.
Browsing was enough to scratch the itch in my case.
Then when you find one of them on the open road, they sell themselves like it's a job interview or something.
I enjoy tackling fierce foes and prefer combat's thrills to gathering items. I am confident and may act independently.
I enjoy tackling fierce foes and prefer combat's thrills to gathering items. I am confident and may act independently.
For your convenience, I've broken it down into 3 parts. Professional resume, athletic and special skills resume, and Dwight Schrute trivia.
I am ready to face any challenges that might be foolish enough to face me.
Travelling is immersive, but just takes way too long. and whilst the consumable fast travel system gets less of an issue as the game goes on, it just feels archaic in the modern day with how accessible open world games tend to be. Questing is so surface level and pointless, it doesn't feel worthwhile assisting people, as the same rewards can just be gotten by exploring the world and killing a few big monsters, and the emergent quests to fill in the blanks are escort missions of all things. The story just wasn't up to par, and you can really tell it was an afterthought alongside iterating on the combat of the original game. It also feels a bit odd that the true ending wasn't really much of an ending, wherein I hadn't realised I'd hit an endgame state and had, in fact, finished the game. This also resulted in me having one of the post-game activities become bugged, meaning I technically couldn't finish the final quest, although I'm reliably informed that nothing actually happens after doing so what on earth is even the point besides fighting some stronger monster variants? I had a fantastic time fighting in Dragon's Dogma 2, and spent the rest of my 48 hours simply questioning what the point of me dealing with the rest of the game was. What should have been a classic RPG that was immersive and realistic turned out to be an obscure and sometimes buggy mess of unexplained gameplay systems. I got it on sale and didn't feel stung by it, and that's after nearly a year of updates where the game runs with next to no graphical or framerate issues, but even with this fantastic combat system, I'd steer clear unless you have an extremely specific taste. Do you have time for Dragon's Dogma 2? On this channel I like to give my thoughts on the game, alongside a bit more of a deep dive on the time you have to invest, so you know what you're getting into, because time is precious, right? If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, feel free to like and share. If you subscribe, I'm looking to put out regular content like this, alongside some more in-depth video essays and freeform videos, so stick around, and if you have any requests on future videos, just drop them in the comments. And finally, if you want to come chat with me, you can find me over on x.com/gracious_rhino. I'm Gracious Rhino, look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.